What's up, folks? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Lucas. In this video, we're going to talk about prompt engineering. Now, we're going to discuss what prompt engineering is, why does it matter, the basics of prompts, and then we're going to get down with some simple experimentation techniques that you can use to build a foundation for developing your process for developing good prompts. So starting out, prompt engineering is a discipline for engineering prompts, right? So the goal is to design good prompts. And overall, the idea is for you to have a process for developing prompts that yield high performance in some particular task like summarization, extraction, etc. Right? Now, why does prompt engineering matter? Well, the outputs of large language models are uncertain, right? We have, with every model based on a transformer architecture, you have a probability distribution over the next possible words. That means that every time you prompt a model, even with the same prompt, you will get slightly different results. And that yields a concern regarding reliability of outputs coming out of these models, right? So what we want to do is build a systematic approach for searching solutions to problems using prompts that mitigates the negative effect of this unreliability. Now, what is a prompt in essence? A prompt is some piece of text that conveys to the user the intention that the user has for the large language model, right? So it can be something like a question, an instruction, a request, etc. Right? So if I come over here on my ChatGPT interface, let's refresh this page. And I can say something like, let me start a new window. Hi, tell me a joke. This is my prompt. Tell me a joke. And the output of the model is going to be some completion that makes sense to that request. So in this case, of course, here's a tech team joke for you. Why don't programmers like nature? It has too many bugs. There you go. So there are many ways. Prompt engineering is a fairly recent discipline that actually also might have a very, it might have an expiration date to it. However, there are many ways to divide what a prompt is and the different aspects of a prompt. And I've seen many different standards coming out on, how to think about it. The one that I like the most is the one that breaks a prompt down into 4 components. So you have the instruction. This is the piece of the text that describes what you want the model to accomplish to do, right? This is where you describe the task to be performed. You have the context, which is any additional information that might help the model with performance. This is where you say something like, you're an expert at this, you're an expert at that, you are a text annotation engine. For those of you who are already initiated in prompt engineering, this would be a good candidate for some description of the system message to the model. But if you don't know what a system message is, don't worry, we'll talk about it when the time comes. Now, so you have the instruction where you describe what you want. You have the context, which is any additional information that helps the model with the performance when you're in your task. Then you have the input data. This is the data that you want the model to focus on and to process, right? In the case of the example that I have here, I'm saying you're a text annotation engine. That's my context. The instructions to classify the sentence into positive or negative. And then the input data is, I like eating pancakes. Is that positive or negative? That's obviously positive, right? And then you have something called the output indicator. Now, the output indicator is where you prime the model to output what you want in the way that you want. So it's where you discuss, it's where you prime the model to output something with a certain format, with a certain structure. You want the answer in 1 paragraph or 2 paragraphs, etc. Right? So you have these 4 components. Now let's put them all into practice. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say, you are a text annotation engine. Classify the following sentence into positive or negative. And then text. I love learning about neural networks. And then output. So I have my context, I have my instruction, I have the input data, and I have the output indicator. So I can send that to the model. and the output that I get in return is the sentence I love learning about neural networks expresses a positive sentiment. Now, just one example on how we can start playing around with this is to look at this output and say, okay, this is a okay response. The problem is I just wanted the classification and nothing else. So I didn't want information. I didn't want the model to give me a lengthy one sentence description of the answer. I just want the word positive or negative. So we can copy this, right? I could edit here. Actually, let's edit right in the interface. And this is a problem where I can change the output indicator because this is the area where I found there was a limitation with the response. So I can say, instead of just saying output, I can say your output should only be the word positive or negative. And then I prime the model for the output. So now my output indicator is a bit bigger. However, the idea is that I want to see if that yields the response in the shape, format, structure that I want. So I can save and submit. And there we go. Now I get something that I enjoy. So this idea of reviewing a prompt based on a specific condition or criteria or requirement, and then improving it, and then measuring somehow the response. In this case, it was a subjective measure of me qualitatively and me analyzing the quality of the output and then improving my prompt to get a better answer, is the core foundation of what prompt engineering is all about. Obviously, when we talk about the engineering aspect of it, we are discussing having a systematic process for getting to these results. So we want to stem away from subjectivity and we want to focus on things that we can control quantitatively, right? At least the best of our, at least to the best of our ability. Okay, so to review, so far we have instruction where we describe what we want, the context, the input data, and the output indicator, right? So let's take these 4 aspects and let's try to set up a system for getting good results with a large language model like ChatGPT. So what we're going to do is I'm going to come over here and we're going to create a little system for how to get better answers and how to improve with a given prompt or a set of prompts for a given task. And for that, we need a simple template, something that we can use as our, let's say, recipe for starting out an experiment. So to do that, we're going to set up a template that's very simple. So I'm going to come over here on this notebook, and the template's going to be defining a task. So number 1, we're going to define a task. Number 2, we're going to define an evaluation metric for that task. Then we're going to generate candidate prompts for that particular task, prompts that we think solve that problem in some way. Then we're going to do some experimentation where we test, evaluate, and compare to find the best candidate out of the list of candidates that we set up in the beginning. And we can use something like Google Sheets, which is what we're going to do at this first stage. And finally, at the end, I want to make a few comments about how to learn when to stop experimenting, which is going to be a function of a series of requirements like the token cost, the available time and urgency for solving, or priority for solving the task, and how to avoid pitfalls like over-engineering something and then never actually getting it into production or getting it to be actually useful. All right, so we're going to define a task, define some evaluation metric, we're going to generate some candidate prompts, we're going to experiment and find the best candidate. Now, within this little template, there's one thing that I want to emphasize is that once we define a task clearly, we're going to break that task down into pieces. So to illustrate that idea, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to come over here to my demo prompt. Is once we define a task, one thing that we want to do beyond just going to generate the prompt candidates. It's to break a problem down into sub-problems. That means instead of like having some big task like summarize this book of 300 pages, we want to break that process down into sub-steps. And then we want to have prompts that solve all of these subtasks. And then we'll get to an evaluation that actually gives us the best possible answer for the problem, okay? So the task that I decided to do for this demonstration is the task of automatic reference section from Markdown essay. What does that mean? Imagine you have a piece of text that you're writing for some essay, for a research report, for an article, for whatever it is, right? And the essay is something like this, right? You have some piece of text in the evolving field of AI, and while you're writing the essay, you're putting some links to websites or to papers or to whatever it is that are the source or the evidence for an argument within your essay or research report, etc. Right? So you're writing this and you're putting those and you're referencing those links. What I would like to do for this simple task is to have an AI model that can read through the draft that I've written, and create automatically a reference section for my research report, for my essay, right? That's the goal. All right. So how do we go about doing that? Well, we can break this problem down into 4 separate steps. We can break it down into identifying all the citations and the sources present in the report, in the text, in the essay, right? And we want to identify those sources along with the citations or the descriptions of what those sources contain or represent, right? Then for each of those, we want to produce a correct reference bullet point. That means having a list of bullet points, and each bullet point contains that information with the description of the source and the link, the source to the actual original source. Then we want to convert that to a Markdown format in case that in the essay we haven't done that and the citations are not in Markdown format. When I say Markdown format, I mean that there's a specific syntax when you're writing in Markdown for referencing a hyperlink, which is this bracket parenthesis syntax. And then finally, we want to add the reference section at the end. That just means adding the header of the reference section at the end. And the reason why I put this as a 4th additional step is because we can actually do that programmatically through code, and we don't actually have to have the model do that. And anytime we have a subtask that can be done through code, it's better to do it through code than to do it through the large language model, because we want to make tasks for LLMs as simple as possible. All right, so we have these 4 sub-steps. So what I've decided to do is to run a series of experiments to systematically reach performance that I like. So what I decided to do is let me go back here. There we go. So I have a little table in a Google Sheets where I organize all this information in the experiment in order to programmatically reach the better solution. And I start by defining my task, which we already discussed, creating a reference section from a draft essay containing inline references and citations. And actually, let me just add in Markdown format. After we've done that, we broke it down into 4 subtasks, right? Identifying all the citations with the respective source. For each citation, we want to produce the correct bullet point, and then we want to convert that to Markdown format, and then we want to add the reference section at the end. And I put strike through in this subtask 4 because we're not going to be doing that with large language models, with ChatGPT or whatever. So for our experiment, I decided to create a little table. It's very simple, that contains the subtask, the number that identifies the subtask being tested, and then the components of the prompt rather than the full prompt. And the reason why I do that is because I want to control for which part I'm changing, which part of the prompt I'm changing, and how that is affecting the output and the performance in the task at hand. But we could, we could easily just do the prompt candidates and then different techniques being used. There are like many ways to construct this table. But the reason why I chose this one is to have more control over which aspects of the prompt we are changing to yield better performance, right? And then here at the end, I have the output, which will be the answer from the model, and the score. Now, the score is very important because it goes on to that part that we've discussed about the evaluation metric that we're going to be choosing to solve the task at hand. So in this case, the score is going to be something that I like to call the usefulness score, which essentially means a number between 0 and 10, where from 5 to 10, we have something that's useful, right? And that we could actually use for actually solving the task somewhat. But 5 means that it's not even close to what the ideal output should be. And then 6 is a little bit better, 7. And in my way of doing this, I like thinking about 8 to 10 as numbers that represent something that I would actually use for myself, that it's actually better than me doing it manually or doing through some code solution. So obviously, there are many ways to do this particular, to evaluate and have a metric for this particular task. For example, one automatic way would be to count in the output of the model how many URLs are given and compare that to how many URLs are in the actual text, how many unique URLs are in the actual text. And then if there's a difference in that number, we know that the model is making a mistake because it's not getting all the sources. However, for now, just to illustrate, we're going to be doing just a subjective score of usefulness for us. And then we define and we start our little experiment. So for solving tasks 1 and 2, I actually decided to lump them together into one prompt because I think that they're simple enough, which means identifying citations with source and then putting that as bullet points. Because we can have an instruction that looks something like this. Let me just put it here. Extract all the citations in the following draft essay with their respective source and output a bullet list with all the citations and their sources. Okay, so we have this instruction, and I'm actually gonna go here on my VS Code notebook where I actually realize all these experiments. But I want you to focus just on the prompts and the scoring process and the experimentation process, and don't pay attention to the code. Okay, so here we have it. We have the instruction to the model, and then we're going to have some input data, right? Which is an example essay that I actually generated with ChatGPT, which should serve as our test scenario. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it right here under quotes. And what I want to do actually is I want to start this experimentation with ChatGPT 3.5, which is the model that I actually used for preparing this demo experimentation, because I think it's interesting to see if certain types of tasks, especially simpler tasks, can be solved with ChatGPT 3.5 because it's faster and cheaper. So we have our instruction, we have our input data, and now let's copy our output indicator. Your output should be just bullet points containing all the citations. So let me just paste that here. And let's put in the context. We're going to put the context in the beginning. And we're not going to be using a system message right now, which would be these custom instructions that you have in the interface that I can put here, because we want to start out with everything in the prompt. Okay. And then we can move on to putting this in system message, etc. Okay. So now that we have all of that, we're going to record the output. Now, I've already done this experiment in code form before, but I'm going to be redoing it with you right here in the interface so that we can go through this process together and understand how we can evolve systematically. So now that I have my entire prompt, I'm going to send it to, I'm going to send it to ChatGPT. So now I sent it. And there we go. We get the citation, we get a link, citation link. And this looks pretty good. Let me just see if all the links are actually mentioned. So if I go here where I actually did the text, 1, 2, 3, 4, perfect. So we have all the citations properly referenced here. So I'm going to give this a score of 10 because on this input data with this context, instruction, and output indicator, etc., we actually have it perfect. This is a perfect rendition of all the sources in the text. So now that I'm happy with this, we're going to move on and we're going to try task number 3, which is converting to a Markdown format with the URL, hyperlink syntax, brackets and parentheses, right? So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking this output from the model, which I have copied here in the experimentation table. And I'm going to be, again, pasting everything into ChatGPT so that we can together see how this experimentation is going to go down. Let me just make this a little bit smaller so that you can see more stuff. Now we're going to be copying this context, input data. I'm going to copy this to ChatGPT. So I'm copying the output that I got. And since, so I'm going to be saying, I'm going to just put the context before the instruction, which is how I like doing stuff, so that I can set the context before. And then I'm going to be giving the instruction, convert the bullet points into Markdown format. And then I'm giving the bullet points that I got. I'm actually going to use the ones that I got here from ChatGPT instead of the ones that I got originally in the first time that I did this, so that we can have a better rendition of what's going on. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to replace here with this. I'm going to be putting it right here. Beautiful. And the output indicator, let's see, the output indicator, in this case, I didn't put anything for output indicator. So let's see if we get an actually good performance without saying anything about how the output should look like. So I'm going to send this and let's see what we get. Okay. So what we're getting here looks kind of bad, right? It's not really giving us what we were looking for, which would be something like this. Let me just demonstrate. I would be looking for something like this, something like this, and then here the URL, like HTTPS, www, etc. Okay, so this is what we would be looking for, and I would be looking for something in bullet points containing the structure. Instead, I got things a bit separate, which is not ideal. So for this output, particularly, I gave it a score of 6. Actually, even for this one, I would give it even less, but it is in par with what I got when I first did these experimentations. So now we have a problem, right? So for subtask number 3, we're not getting what we want. So what we're going to do, we're going to try to improve the prompt to improve in the score in the performance of the task. So again, subtask number 3, and then we have an instruction, input data, and now I'm adding an output indicator. And let's see what we get. So originally, my score improved from 6 to 7. So let's see if we actually can improve this even more. So now I have all the same information, but I added an output indicator, which I'm going to be copying here. So in this output indicator, what I'm doing is I'm saying your output should be the bullet point list with the source references as the hyperlinks and the descriptions as the anchor text, like this. And I give a structured demonstration of how the output should look like, which is anchor text, URL, etc. Right? So I'm going to save and submit. And let's see if we improve the performance of the model. Okay, so as we can see now, what happened was the model put in Markdown format correctly the reference to the text and the link. So that's why these links here are clickable. However, it added more information about the source in text. And I don't want that. I just want the description of the source and the hyperlink, everything in one. So I want everything here in the interface to look blue and clickable, right? So this is actually in par with what I got in originally in this experiment. So I gave it its score of 7 because now this is much better than what we got before, right? So we actually have a Markdown formatted clickable link with the description, but we added information that we didn't want. So I gave that a score of 7 because it's more useful than before. However, it's still not what we're looking for. So what I'm going to be doing now is, again, for task 3, I'm gonna try something else where in this case, let me see, I think I improved the output indicator again. So I'm going to be copying the instruction. I'm going to be copying the context, which is the same. Yeah. So this is the same context. I'm going to be copying the input data, which should be right here. This is the input data that I got originally. So let's take, this is the input data that we had originally. So we want to use the same. Let me just copy that input data here. And then I'm going to be putting it here. And now I want to copy the demonstrations that I did on the output indicator. So in the output indicator, I know this is a lot of text. Let me just separate so that you can see. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. So the output indicator now looks like this. Your output should be the bullet point list with the source references as the hyperlinks and the descriptions as the anchor text, like this. And then I demonstrate that it's a bullet point, anchor text, URL, and then I demonstrate that the links should follow again in the same structure. So now everything is kind of covered. So let's see if now the model actually has a better performance. So I'm going to send that to the model. And let's see if that is in par with the experimentations that I did through code using the API. Beautiful. Now we get a perfect score, as we can see here. So, and just like the experimentations that I did, now this is a perfect score because this is precisely what I wanted. Okay, so now that we have this, we actually improved enough so that we can try a different input data. So, and go through the same process again, right? So I have here a different input data example, and we're going to be going through the same process again and again until we get to what we're looking for. All right, so we've done one example, right? So I want to cover a second example, and we want to go through the same process and work our way up to getting the best score possible in this particular example. So again, we're going to work on the subtask 1 and 2, which is to identify the citations with the sources. And for each citation, we want to produce the correct reference bullet point. And then I want to use, instruction, input data, output indicator, context. So let's do that. I'm going to copy the context. I'm going to paste it here. Again, we're doing this like this manually, etc. because right now we want to just get the foundations of how to do this in practice. We're not concerned about automation or, running experiments automatically, etc. We're concerned with understanding what we're trying to achieve, which is to systematically improve the prompts to get the task to get to where we want. So now I'm going to copy here the instructions. Hopefully we'll get results similar to the ones that I already tried out with the with this example before. So I'm going to copy this. This is just another piece of a draft that I generated with ChatGPT that contains a few sources inside. So I'm going to add like a little colon there, and actually that means that I would change in the original the data in the table here. Okay, so now we're going to add the output indicator. Your output should be just bullet points containing citations and resources, etc., etc. So I'm going to put it here, and we're going to run this and see what we get. Okay, so we run it, and all right, so we get not so great results again. So let's see if this matches what I did before. Yeah, this is a better result than what I got before, because what I got before missed one source. Let's see if this one missed one source. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Out of how many? Let's see how many sources were present in the original text. So we have 1, So we have one source right here, and then we have one, let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, we had 6. Oh, 7. I think we had 7 distinct sources being called. Medical AI research. I don't even know if these are actually real because I generated AI, but let's see. One, and then we had journal personalized medicine. That was the second one. And then the third one was AI ethics journal. So we have 1, 2, 3. And then AI health trust, that's 4, right? Health trust, AI ethics journal, health trust 4. And then health collaboration 5. I think, let's see, let's try again. So we have 1, AI health trust 2, transparency standards 3, ethics 4, health privacy 5, journal of personalized medicine 6, and medical AI research 7. So we had 7 distinguished resources, and the output I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's missing sources. So just like in the experimentation I did before, I give this a score of 0 because, I mean, I'm not going to say 0, actually. Actually, 0 is a bad response because I actually got a similar thing, but it was missing one source. But 0 might not reflect the fact that I actually correctly extracted 5 sources. So maybe I would give this like a 3 or a 4. But nevertheless, it's useless. So I'm not even gonna try it. What I'm gonna do again is I'm gonna try it out again, and I'm gonna again make a few changes, right? So I think that the changes I did here, if I'm not mistaken, were at the extract all the following with citation resources. Yeah. So I changed the instruction in this second example. I think I kept everything else the same. So I'm going to give the context again. I'm going to give the output indicator again. I'm going to give the input data again, right? So we're going to try that again. We'll see if this time we get better results. And I'm going to send this. Let's see if we get better results. We want 7, reference to 7 sources. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, we got bad results. And just like in the example that I did before, we have missing sources, which is this little note that I took here, which is also on the table, which I find is a good way to construct our evaluation set by just going one by one and seeing what we get. So now what I decided to do is I remembered that I felt that the input data was a bit big for the GPT 3.5 model. And this is something that I could, in theory, break down the text instead of changing the model. So that's what I did. I decided to go with like a smaller chunks of text to see if I would get reliably better results. So everything was kept the same. So let me just get all of the things here. Your output, and I'm gonna put the context in the beginning. Yeah, beautiful. AI tools, and I'm gonna skip a line and put the output indicator. So now I changed the input data because I wasn't getting the results that I wanted. And in this example, I only have, I think, 3 sources. 1, 2, 3. Medical 4. No, I think this one has 4. Medical AI research 1, journal 2, health privacy 3, AI ethics journal 4, and I get 1, 2, 3. So this one is still not giving me the results that I'm looking for. Still missing one source. Just when I did the experiments, I had the same results. So still missing one source. So now I'm adding, let me see what I changed here. I think it was the output indicator, probably. Let me just put it here. And so I'm going to put here, oh, sorry. And now let me just go here. I'm going to put the context in the beginning. I'm going to, yeah, the rapid, I'm going to put everything here inside the triple quotes. I'm going to separate everything. It should contain all citation. So make sure to extract all the links in the draft. Yeah, I think that the change that I did was I changed the output indicator to emphasize that I want all the links in the draft. So I'm doing the same input data this time. And let's see if we actually get the correct results this time. I think that when I did this experiment, it actually worked. Yeah, it was only missing like one piece of information. I think it was the sentence description from one of the sources. Yeah. So I got the same results just like I did in my experiments. So this one didn't come with the sentence description, only with the URL. However, I did extract all the information. So I gave this a 9, which honestly was good enough for me. So that got me to go to the next phase, which is to convert it to Markdown format. So again, we do the same thing. We get the output of the model and we feed that back in, right? And we do the same process again. And I'm copy pasting and I'm doing things kind of roughly and manually because the idea here is just to do this systematically first, step by step. And as we understand what we're trying to achieve and what's the process to get there, we can evolve into automation, programming, and then afterwards we can get into putting in frameworks like LangChain or GPT Prompt Engineer. Like once we understand the process, it's easy to add in frameworks because we have an idea and a model in our minds of the requirements that we have for the task at hand. So let me just put the context in the beginning. So again, we're going to convert this to Markdown format. We give the input data. The input data is the output from before. And in the output indicator, we explain how the thing should look. And we're using the prompt that was successful in the previous task, right? Which should mean that, you know, this should give us the better results. It should give us good results, just like it did last time with the previous example. So now I run this and I think this should work. Let me see. Yeah, this one should work because in the experiments I did, it did work. Let's take a look. And there we go. Perfect. So we get the results that we were looking for. I mean, I would like to see a sentence description for this. However, it did put everything into Markdown format. So just like in the experiments I did, I gave this a score of 10. I'll give this a score of 10 as well, because given the input text, which was just indeed the link, it did do the thing that we were looking for. So that means that now I think that we are done with the experimentation part. Yeah. So because we've managed to find for each subtask, the exact prompt, which is in our case a combination of instruction, input data, output indicator, and context, which yields the best response possible, right? So I'm very happy with this. I give it a score of 10, and now I have my prompt, right? The prompt is going to be all of the combination of instruction, output indicator, and context that yielded the highest score for each subtask, right? Which, you know, in order to finish things off, what we need now is to go to subtask 4, which is adding the reference section at the end. Now, this, if we wanted to use ChatGPT, it would be as simple as getting this output from ChatGPT, right? So I'm getting this, and then I would just say something like, add a reference section as references to the top of this bullet list. And then I would give this as an input, right? And this is a relatively simple task for ChatGPT. As you can see, it would add the references and we would be done. However, I find that this is very unnecessary, given that this is such a simple task that we can do that through code. So what I did in my final response here in the notebook where I did these experiments programmatically, I wrote a little function that you can see here, which is called add reference header, and it will take the output citation bullets and just add the header with the references. Actually, let me remove this and give us the correct result after we get the result from the prompt in subtask 3, giving us the correct thing for the full reference section. Now, the cool thing is that once we have that, now we have the two prompts that work. So we can do something like this. Let me show you here. So I did these experiments in this VS Code Jupyter Notebook. I wanted to do them in the ChatGPT interface so that we could have this conversation about the process itself. But once we have that, we can write some code to put everything together, just like I'm doing here, where I write down the prompts that were successful in each subtask, and I put them all together in a little pipeline. So let me just show you here. I'm going to go down. I'm going to go down here, and there should be a function here called create reference section. There you go. So I put everything together in this little function, create reference section, which will take in the prompt that was successful in solving subtasks 1 and 2. And then I put things into Markdown header using the prompt that was successful to generate those headers. And now we have our task solved, and we have something that we can actually, put to work, deploy, put in production, whatever the case may be. In this case, this is a very silly toy example, just to demonstrate the process to get to something like this, which is something that we could put to work. And then obviously we would version this and evolve it. Maybe we can make this better, lower latency, change the model. And remember that this was just for demonstration purposes. And this table is something that we can evolve, and we can put things here to take other things into consideration. Like, for example, token cost, or the token size of each prompt, token costs. We can put here things like the model. Like for all of these examples, I use GPT 3.5 Turbo, the current GPT 3.5 Turbo, which is the 0125 preview version, which is not preview anymore, but whatever. So I could have put a series of other things here. However, the idea would be the same. It would be to break things down into subtasks and have an organized and systematic way to evolve the prompts based on a metric or score, right? In this case, I did it in a way that wasn't automatic. So ideally, we would want to automate this process of evaluation so that we don't have to manually inspect everything that goes on. And there are many techniques to do that. Like, for example, I could use a better model like GPT-4 to evaluate the results so that it does the job that we're doing right now of looking through the draft and seeing if the references there match the references created by the model. However, I find that the core idea is not really to put all of the possible parameters here and the best scores, etc., but to get down this very simple template in your mind, which, let me just go back to the template notebook here, which is to define a task and then break that task down into subtasks, define an evaluation metric that evaluates success, generate candidate prompts, experiment, test, evaluate, compare, find the best candidate, and we stop experimenting at this initial stage when we find prompts that solve the tasks with the acceptable threshold score that we have to define usually in the beginning. In my case, I defined that, at least an 8 or a 9 would be enough to move on. And we avoid over-engineering at the beginning, so we make optimization a requirement in production, right? But this is this and many other things about prompt engineering, frameworks, how to have more systematic ways to going about this is something that we're going to cover in the next section. All right. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you next time. Cheers.